Hey everybody, welcome to our Mindworx Zoom, where we take a second, we talk about the three principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. For myself, for Mitch Kunert, and for Melissa, the three principles has had a profound impact on our lives. And today, we're really going to focus our attention on something that has happened very personally to me over the last week, the mourning period. That's M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, the mourning period, and how we handle mourning. On Thursday, I got a phone call that my friend Carl, Mitch knows Carl, Melissa knows Carl, those who know me well know Carl. Carl is 79 years old, and I met Carl about 10 years ago. And it happened that over the course of the last 10 years, Carl and myself would go out every Friday night and we'd have a happy hour beer. And tragically, Carl was in a tree cutting some limbs. He fell and he passed away. And you know, it's pretty cool when you have the experience of the three principles, how you're able to deal and function with something like this. And you know, one of the things that I want to share right away about the mourning period is we talk all the time about belief systems with the three principles. That you know what we are taught by our parents and the environment that we grow up in, it creates a belief system. And what's interesting about the mourning process is there is no one right way of mourning. And it was interesting when I found out about Carl, like it didn't quite hit me. It was so surreal. Like here was this man that I had spoken to just a few days before. And I really wasn't caught up with any emotion that I thought that I would be. And you know, the belief system that I kind of grew up with is that when somebody passes away, there's this tragic event and the tears begin to flow in this Niagara Falls. It didn't happen that way for me. And it really didn't happen until, you know, the next few days when the shock of his passing did eventually pass. And that's when the tears came. But what's cool, and Mitch and Melissa, I know that you can relate to this, is that when we talk about the three principles, the way that we choose to think, we don't have to stay there. And because we have practiced the ability to be aware of our thinking, we have the ability to change our thinking. What that means is that we can't think our way out of sadness, but we just don't have to stay there. And the cool thing is that over the course of the last few days, while there has been a time for tears, there has also been a time of really great reflection and of great gratitude in the experience that I've had with Carl. And it just really kind of reflects what we are seeing in our culture even today, you know, and about the passing of George Floyd. And that while it's a tragic event, you know, there are always the silver linings that we can take from those experiences. And Mitch, I know that, you know, when you lost your father, what was that? Was that maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's been longer than that. It's actually, it was 2011 now, so almost 9 years ago now at this point in time.
And can you share about your experience with the three principles and how you dealt with the passing of your father?
Yeah, you know, and it's really interesting, Ben. When my father passed, and again, that was when I was pretty well entrenched into the three principles, and you know, I think I started that journey more on 2008, 2009. So I was well within the studying and even getting to the point of teaching our course at that point in time. I almost, this is going to be weird to say, I almost had a little guilt in the sense that I experienced the emotion right away, and my dad had cancer, and I want to say, Ben, too, I want to say, you know, thanks for bringing this topic into play. I want to address you because I know Carl was close friends with yours. I want to address Carl's family if they happen to watch this. We're all praying and thinking about you and in this time, but we all go through loss, and with my father, especially in a situation where you have cancer and it's going to be something that you know is going to come, you have a little different preparation mentally than maybe what happened with your situation where all of a sudden this just tragic accident. But I've experienced both of those things. My father passed away after a battle with cancer, but then my grandmother and my aunt were killed instantly in a car accident about just a couple years later after that. So both of those things happened with an understanding of the three principles. And I guess the best way I can describe it, we talk about this in our class, is that the three principles doesn't remove emotion, and we don't want it to. You know, when you're sad, you should cry it out like you've never before. But what happened with me is that some people in those circumstances, they feel that loss, and it does impact others differently, right? If it's my father versus if it's a friend versus if it's someone that I didn't even know. But that continuum, the closer they are to you, the more the impact of the emotional side of it. And it's often thinking, okay? So for me, I had a little bit of guilt because I almost felt like people were expecting me to be more emotional, more distraught. But again, the three principles, instead of those highs and those really, really lows, it still keeps me here. You know, I don't dip all the way down there, and I just don't stay there. And that's, I think everybody deals with loss. That's when you start hearing the things about, like, you remember the positives, right? I mean, it's cool. We as human beings know the right answer. Think of all the positive things. Remember the good times. Don't dwell on the loss or what you'll never be able to have that conversation on the porch with your father anymore. Because if you stay there, you're going to stay low. It's going to keep you a lot lower. So that's just kind of some of the experiences that I had.
Melissa, how does this relate to when we talk about the silver linings of tragic events, because we can choose to think about those silver linings. How has the events of George Floyd and what we have seen, what are positives that we can take away from that tragic experience?
That's a loaded question. Before I respond to that, I want to talk a little bit about what I heard both of you say. You experienced, or Ben, when you found out that Carl had died, you were in a state of shock and you didn't necessarily respond how maybe you would have expected yourself to respond. And Mitch, you talked about maybe feeling a little bit guilty that you didn't respond immediately the way that other people might have expected of you. I think that's interesting in terms of the expectations that we place on ourselves and what we think other people are expecting us to do. I think all of our feelings are very valid and we all respond to things in very different ways. And we're seeing that in the news right now with what's going on. I think it's really healthy to cry. When you were talking, I thought about a piece of advice that my ex-mother-in-law gave me, and she's an awesome person and we're still good friends. And she told me, and she's lost 2 husbands to cancer. She told me that she can't be sad all the time. So what she does is she schedules her sadness. She gives herself time and space to feel that sadness and to cry. And it might be an hour or 2. And then she moves on to something that's going to make her feel a little bit more happy and positive and focus on the good things about her life instead of dwelling on her losses. Again, I don't think that there's any one right way to respond to things, and everybody's feelings are valid. And I think that that's especially relevant when we look at the news today. We don't know where other people are standing, and we're not in other people's shoes. And I don't want to get political about this at all. I talked to Ben about this before the Zoom. I don't want to get into the politics because it's extremely divisive. But I think that we need to give credit to everybody's feelings and not have expectations about how people should react to certain things, whether it's death or other tragedies or something else.
So one of the things that I want to go back to that I think really explains the 3 principles, and Mitch, can you show us that slide that we use in our class, think, feel, action, result? And I just kind of want to give an example of what I've experienced this week. You know, the thought that I lost this very close friend of mine that I will never see again, the feeling of sadness, the action, there was a lot of tears. And the result was, you know, I was in a dark place. When we talk about the consciousness piece of the 3 principles, that's awareness. And when I was aware of my thinking, you know, for one, I accepted the fact that it was okay because, like we've said today, there's a time to mourn. But I also knew, kind of like what you were saying with your ex-mother-in-law, Melissa, that, you know, you schedule those times. But it wasn't that I stopped thinking about Carl. I thought of Carl in a very different way. And instead of thinking that I would never see him again, I thought about the gratitude that I had the opportunity to know him for the 10 years that I did, that he taught me so much about, I mean, the simplicity of my plumbing. You know, Carl was a plumber. He showed me how to you know, do things with pipes and how to use the machine called the screwdriver. And when I think about those things, it leaves me with a feeling of great gratitude. And I'm not in that dark place. And the action is is really not one of tears, but one of a smile. And the result makes me feel better. And I can choose to stay in those dark places, or I can think about all of those positives. And again, I think about, the tragic event of George Floyd. And, I watched some of that funeral yesterday, and I just think about how I think we have all changed as a country, as a world through this experience in a way that we should have years before, with the same kind of tragic and senseless deaths that we've seen. But, it really has brought to light this idea of, growing up white in this country versus black, brown, of a minority. And I think that there is a greater awareness of that. And, there's meaning, to George Floyd's deaths. And there's a silver lining that we can take away from this, that I think that we will all be better for this. And I go back to Carl, I am a better person today for having that man in my life. And that's not something that I can sit around and feel sad about.
Well, and I think that we can think about the gifts that person gave us while we're here. And I just want to say, I had the privilege of being at Carl's funeral today. And the first song that they chose to play has stuck with me, and I think will stick with me throughout the following days, just the simplicity of the lyrics. And I just looked it up. It's by Tom Holland, and I'd never heard it before, but it's a song called I Love. And it starts, I love little baby ducks, old pickup trucks, slow moving trains and rain. I love country streams, sleep without dreams, Sunday school in May, and hey. And it goes on, but it just talks about the simplicity of all of the things that we can enjoy on a daily basis. And I really feel like that was kind of a gift that Carl gave me today. Yes, my air conditioning is broken, and yes, my refrigerator is also broken now. But there are so many little things that I can be grateful for. Even just sitting here on this Zoom with you two and listening to the breeze through the trees. There's a lot that we can leave others. And that's one of the things that I think Carl left me today. So.
Well, and one last thing, and I'll kind of sort of close it up here, is, the tragic way that Carl passed. Again, there's a way that I can choose to think about that. A lot of people said Carl was 79. What was he doing in a tree? He should have been asking somebody for help. That alone would have killed Carl, to have to ask somebody for help. Carl was a very independent person. This is what Carl did. And we talk about mind, which is energy, right? And I'm a big believer. Carl was not, but I'm a very big believer in the spiritual energy of things. And my good friend Oprah once told me, and 300 million Americans, that we are spiritual beings living a human experience. And that when our time on this earth is come to a close, and we shuffle off that mortal coil, that spiritual being, that energy that I believe so strongly because of the three principles, that energy still exists. And for the rest of my life, whenever I want to call on Carl to be a part of my life, he will always be there. And I am just so incredibly grateful for that. And I just think, Carl was 79, he had overcome cancer, and you just don't know. And I don't know if Carl, over the next year or two, would have gotten sick and had to have gone to a hospital and died in a hospital bed. And that would have been the last thing that Carl would have wanted. And you begin to think of things very differently. And I'm just been very grateful for the experience that I've had over the last week. And I attribute that so much to my understanding of the three principles.
Absolutely. And I think our nation's seeing that too. And I think we all have, this is what we say, is that energy will move on for whoever, from Carl to George, and their energies will make us better. That's just the bottom line. And you have to think that way. You have to see how we get better. And we'll talk more about other things and topics, but today's was kind of about this mourning process that our nation's going through, and that you're going through personally, and that many of us go through at some point in our lives. So thanks for bringing the topic forward, Ben. I really appreciate it. Melissa,
well,
all of you.
There's a great book our friend Julie Powell gave me, and it's called Everyone Belongs, because we are all the same. We're all the same. And so, my mourning might be different than somebody else's mourning, but we all experience the same things in very much the same ways, even though it can be completely different, if that makes any sense. I guess, I don't know. Are there any closing thoughts that we want to share before we end today's Zoom?
Not me, Ben. I'm good.
Melissa?
I'll close with the last lyrics of this song that was at Carl's funeral. I love honest, open smiles, kisses from a child, tomato on the vine, and onions. I love winners when they cry, losers when they cry, music when it's good, and life. And I love you too.
All right, you guys.
So,
Yeah,
That's the way to do it, right?
that's the way to end right there. So until next week, you guys, let's live the dream, right? All right, get better every day, and keep those thoughts in the positive direction. So thanks a lot.
Thanks.
guys.